Now, we've come to the end of the main presentation on Bioshock Infinite, and we're going to look at the main characters of the game and discuss the archetypal roles each of them play. Now, I should warn you though, in classic Bioshock fashion, the standard character archetypes really don't fit so neatly as we would see in many other stories. Ken Levine really likes to take story elements and characters and turn them completely upside down, which is something that is perfectly okay to do, presuming you can actually pull it off with a great story and make it believable like this one. In the world of Bioshock Infinite, there is a lot of ambiguity when it comes to the character archetypes. So let's just get that out of the way first. There's going to be a lot of overlap here. The idea of the hero in Bioshock Infinite has quite obviously been turned on its ear. The role of the hero or heroine by Journey's End is to integrate the key aspects of the story's main characters within him or herself. So the heroine in this case, Elizabeth, accomplishes this primarily by confronting the opposing characters head on. Now, she may or may not need to vanquish every character that she has a conflict with standing in her path. The heroine achieves this goal through struggle and great sacrifice, of course. The heroine makes very important choices in the story which affect the outcome. Yet by the end of the game, with the closing sequence, Elizabeth, the heroine of the story, and when I say closing sequence, I mean the closing sequence where she is in the water with Booker. That's the closing sequence I'm talking about. And so by the time that scene has been established, she chooses to vanquish the primary antagonist of the story, which of course is Booker. If you want to start with a more traditional example, because this could get kind of confusing. If you want to start with a more traditional example of the hero's journey framework of storytelling, you should see my previous videos on the first two Silent Hill games and the archetypal characters if you aren't already familiar with this dynamic, because the archetypes in Bioshock really do challenge conventional understandings. This sort of rule breaking is done by high-level writers such as Ken Levine. Definitely not recommended for beginners. Here is a simplified outline of the hero's journey, or heroine's journey in this case, and how it applies to Elizabeth. So in general, in the hero's journey, we have a call to adventure, right? That kind of sets everything in motion. And then next, we have the supernatural aid. We have something that happens that's way out of the ordinary that happens to the hero, right? And it's involving the Ludises bringing Booker into an alternate reality and spiriting away baby Anna. The mentor appears, and the journey or the struggle really starts to begin. The mentor, I don't want to give anything away and tell you who that is, but the revelation... there's certain revelations that happen. Characters reveal things about themselves to the hero. And then there's a transformation as a result of that. There's other transformations as well that happen. And then at some point there's an atonement. And then Elizabeth returns to the normal world, whatever that is. I put normal kind of in quotes there because what is normal in Bioshock Infinite, really? Next, the next archetype I'm going to talk about is the Threshold Guardians. Now, Threshold Guardians can be any type of character, and oftentimes major roles in the story can double as this character archetype. So some major characters can also be underlings, or not underlings, but they can represent the archetype of the Threshold Guardian. Okay. And the Threshold Guardian is one who directly challenges the hero or heroine in their quest. They kind of stand in their way. So it could technically be a lot of different characters, although it's typically the ones that you find yourself confronting again and again, that are just standing in your path and keeping you from progressing. So technically it could be any one of them. But most often it can be lesser characters, because if you vanquish a threshold guardian but then they survive, they're often, in most stories, they're often converted to allies. Whereas, the main villain of the story it's very rare that the main villain of the story is going to be converted into an ally, or the other major characters of the story will be converted into an ally. It would make for a super weird story, and it wouldn't be interesting, because there would be nothing to press up against, no conflict really happening anymore, because everyone's your friend. It's just, no one would want that kind of story. It'd be boring. So in the case with Elizabeth and Lady Comstock, for example, Elizabeth was able to arrive at a certain reconciliation with Lady Comstock's ghost, commenting that she felt that part of herself resided with Lady Comstock, which indicates our heroine of the story was able to successfully integrate within herself and convert Lady Comstock as sort of an ally, right? So that's why Lady Comstock, or at least I should say Lady Comstock's ghost, because we don't really get to, Lady Comstock really is never alive in Bioshock Infinite. So she only serves as a threshold guardian, at least in this respect, in the way that she confronts Elizabeth, but then Elizabeth converts her to an ally. So the next group, or the next archetypal character we're going to talk about, is the Herald, or the Heralds in this case. And of course, the Heralds are Rosalind and Robert Ludus. The Herald introduces significant change in the story and is responsible for ushering the hero along in their quest. They kind of start the whole thing rolling. They're kind of the one who either appear at the very beginning and say this is what this is about, or they're the ones that precipitate the whole thing happening in the first place. They're the reason for it all happening, right? And Rosalind is very much that reason. So the entire reasons for Columbia's existence and for Anna's kidnapping, along with all the other quantum craziness happening in the story, is the doing of Rosalind Ludus. Rosalind and Robert appear throughout key parts of the story to add a little comic relief, as heralds do, as well as to help Booker and Elizabeth progress successfully in their journey. In a typical story, the playable character will invariably be the hero, right? But not always. However, there isn't much about Bioshock Infinite that is really all that typical. And so the archetypal character role of the Shapeshifter is fulfilled perfectly by Booker DeWitt and Zachary Comstock, who is Booker DeWitt, and, you get it. So this is really genius, because even if his duplicitous clash of alternate realities weren't enough, both Booker and Comstock are deeply conflicted, and they are the most slippery and elusive, volatile characters of the bunch. They fit the role of the Shapeshifter quite perfectly. These are not, we see them as sort of separate, even though we know they're the same person. They're from different realities, and they converge. If that isn't shapeshifty, I don't know what is. This is like the perfect shapeshifter role that is like turned up to 11. And it's the shapeshifter, after all, who presents many different masks to the hero, right? Hiding his true intentions and loyalties. So very well done. Amazing characters here that represent the shapeshifter archetype. And now we have the Shadow. And I mentioned some overlap, and here's an example of some overlap here. If Elizabeth best fits the role of the heroine in Bioshock Infinite, then her presumed mother, Lady Comstock, very much indeed represents at least one aspect of the shadow for Elizabeth. At one point in the game, Elizabeth even remarks that she feels the ghost of Lady Comstock is somehow part of her. That's a big clue, signaling that she has been able to integrate and recognize this shadow aspect in herself through her confrontation with Lady Comstock. She integrates the shadow of Lady Comstock, and then she's then able to reconcile. That's the classic narrative of the hero reconciling their shadow and progressing in the story. But wait, there's another shadow. And we can't forget that at the very end of the game, Elizabeth must break the cycle by ending Booker DeWitt's life. So in this sense of reconciliation and finality, the heroine confronts the reality of the situation and must integrate the final aspect of her shadow side by drowning Booker. Of course, Booker kind of goes along with it, and thereby in that very same instant, he simultaneously atones for his sins and integrates his own shadow by allowing fate to visit him without a fight. Completely genius storytelling right there. And another one. As an alternate to the shadow archetypes, we mustn't forget the role of Cornelius Slate. If we're talking about... Now, let's talk about the shadow of Comstock. Now, it's interesting because Booker is Comstock's shadow, but he's also Comstock. But he's also Elizabeth's shadow. But let's talk about Comstock's shadow. The honorable veteran and disillusioned citizen of Columbia who ends up with a bounty on his head for calling out Comstock on his fictitious claims of bravery in battle. Slate simultaneously exposes this side in Comstock and Corporal DeWitt alike, a side that Comstock completely denies, right? And so that means he's refusing to come to terms with, thereby Comstock never successfully integrates his shadow aspect, right? So Cornelius Slate is also the shadow. It's hard. It's very, you can't pick, there's so many overlaps, and this story is it's just so well done. Bioshock Infinite, amazing. And the mentor, as shady and elusive as Booker DeWitt's past is, his role in helping Elizabeth escape her imprisonment technically makes him the mentor to the heroine, as well as the shapeshifter and the shadow, if this isn't complicated enough. Talk about a complex and multi-layered character, so much so that he even crosses the space-time continuum and ends up fighting an alternate version of himself. And finally, I always love the Trickster. The Trickster is my favorite archetype. And finally, the archetypal character role of the Trickster is played by Rosalind Lutis. She is the primary reason by which Comstock, Elizabeth, and her own brother are involved in these schemes of hopping around between alternate realities in order to fulfill the appetites of destiny. The Trickster challenges the norms of the world and society, bringing the hero into a completely different perspective, speaking in a strange style of paradoxical parables, as the Lutises do, and taking actions which appear strange and unusual. The Trickster possesses a certain unconventional wisdom and intelligence which can both harm and benefit the hero or the heroine, in this case, while remaining completely unaffected to the dramatic events surrounding the supporting characters. Rosalind Lutis is absolutely 100%, without a doubt, the Trickster, and probably my favorite character, even more so than Elizabeth. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this series. I sure had a lot of fun researching this one. One last thing before you go. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share my work with others. That's a huge help to me, And also, if you'd like to support my work and get early access to my all of my videos and my ebook library, my videos are available many months before they appear on YouTube. You can get them on my site way before they're on YouTube. You don't have to watch commercials. You can all watch it. You can watch it in one go if you want. You can binge watch. Please consider joining my site for just a couple bucks. Go to reinstallpaul.com and you can get access to all of my work right there in front of you. And so, guys, thanks so much for watching. I really had a lot of fun making this presentation for you, and I will see you on the next video.